Hey guys, Tommy Carrigan here with Tommy Untamed. Thanks for tuning in. We got an awesome guest today. You're going to enjoy it. And your book, First Casualty, which is fantastic. You guys can find the link to it in the description. It's on Audible. It's a great listen about really, actually, I think as Ron Moeller would used to say, be like, like Delta Force and DevGru, those are the tip of the spear. CIA paramilitary is we're 100 feet ahead of the tip of the spear. We make sure the tip doesn't get injured. And I always thought that was the most hardcore quote. But guys like Rick Prado, Baz, Dale Comstock, Joe Teti, Ron Moeller, all these different guys. And it's always just been the most fascinating thing to me is kind of the Special Operations Group, Special Activities Division, Ground Branch, Air Branch, Maritime Branch, and then I think Armor, whatever the last one is. How it really is. It's the most elite. And your book is it goes into, for me, I was 11 when 9/11 happened, so I don't remember much of it. I remember '03. It's like we're invading Iraq, and even at 13, you're like, why are we doing that? And then but previous to that, Afghanistan. But as it goes on, you would imagine, like, okay, America, the preeminent military force on the planet. It's like you feel like we'd be there right away. And your book illuminates like, oh yeah, we were. We were there right
Yeah.
away. And honestly, it's just a badass book. I have no other way to say it. It's a badass book, and I wouldn't be going on about it if it wasn't. So could you please introduce yourself to everyone that I whatever I missed, and then we'll just hop on into it.
Sure, yeah. Toby Harnden. As you can tell from my accent, originally not in the US, but I've been here since 1999, which is like 26 years. I'm a naturalized American citizen since 2009, proud American. I grew up in Manchester in the north of England, spent 10 years in the Royal Navy, uh, left as a lieutenant, became a journalist. I went to college, went to Oxford University, studied history. In the middle of that, became a journalist at the age of 28 in the sort of mid 1990s. I worked in London. Then I was posted to Northern Ireland and got into, I guess, the subject of terrorism and sort of guerrilla warfare, if you like.
Hmm.
And from there, I ended up in the United States. So I was in Washington, D.C. on 9/11, and then
Oh, damn.
subsequently, yeah, and then subsequently went to the Middle East. I was based in Jerusalem, spent a lot of time in Iraq in '03, '04, '05, '06, and then subsequently based in London, a lot of time in Afghanistan and kind of reporting all over the world, and then came back to the US uh, in 2006, which is wow, nearly 20 years ago now. Covered a lot of US politics for, as part of the day job for British newspapers. Um, but my true love has always been books. So I've written three books. The First Casualty is the third book, but I also wrote a book, Bandit Country, about the IRA heartland of South Armagh in Ireland, and a book called Dead Men Risen about the British battle group in Helmand, Afghanistan in 2009. And so I'm working on a fourth book, which is also about the CIA. Just submitted the manuscript, but now have to sort of edit it and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I do. I sort of see myself as a former journalist, really. Uh, more as an author, historian, and writer and editor. I do a little bit of ghost writing for people, editing, that kind of stuff.
So it kind of seems just with these different books that is so like from I started the podcast in 2019. I have a biology degree. Like I never planned on getting into any of this shit. Um, but I've just always loved reading kind of Cold War and yeah, I don't remember when the thing that gets me is like I recognize I'll zoom in that guy because I remember like in high school, I was
Okay.
just me being me. I have always I don't know just hierarchies and stuff. Air Force, faster and faster planes, bigger and bigger nuclear bombs. I just always loved what's like the preeminent and reading, and then I eventually like stumbling on something of like special. I just remember because it was SAD. I was like the SAD group, Special Activities Division, and I was like, what is that? Now this is back in like late 2000s, and I'd be like searching, and like I couldn't find anything about it. But every once in a while, you'd find little snit, and I was just like, "That's just the coolest thing." It was just kind of a random thought, went about my life, went to college, blah blah blah,
Yeah.
and
No, I mean
then
that's a That's a similar kind of journey that I had. So that guy is Scott
Okay.
Spellmeyer,
Okay.
who I now know very well, but was a figure of mystery for
Dude,
many
that
years.
picture
And
is the
he's
thing that the only constant thing I could ever find over the years was that fucking
yeah.
picture. I was like, that's
Well, and
the guy.
yeah, that's Scott, and he was an Army Ranger. He was wounded in the Battle of Mogadishu in Somalia. Joined the agency, um, paramilitary officer, um, became special intelligence service, so like a general in the CIA, was the
Hmm.
CIA's senior rep on
Yeah.
the National Security Council, and retired uh, a few years ago. But the guy in the middle there is David Tyson, and a similar kind of experience to you. I saw the video of him running through Kalajangi, the fort, in November 2001. I was in Iraq at the time, but I saw somebody showed me some YouTube footage and said, have you ever seen this CIA guy running through this fort? He's just killed loads of people. He was with Mike Spann, who was killed, and I watched it and I thought, kind of what you did, like, who is this guy?
What is
How
that?
did he get there? Like, what's his background? What's happened since? How was he affected? What's he just been through? What's he about to go through? What's he thinking? And so that was really the impetus for what ultimately became First Casualty, to just find these people, find out about what they did and who they were. Because I didn't know what it was, but I knew there was an incredible story there. And sure enough, there was.
Yeah, and it's I guess in hindsight it makes sense that you can't find out about it because it's like the most tiny faction. But yeah, I mean even I remember playing Black Ops, the video game, the Call of Duty game. It'd always start with like the mission would start and it'd be like the place you're in, the time, and the whole thing about that series was so it'd show everything and then one by one the lines would get redacted and sets the stage for whatever. But it would always say Special Activities Division. I'd be like, what is that? And getting more into it, you start to like that really is. I mean, it's the hidden hand. That really is
Yeah.
the what tertia optio. It's the third option. It's the when diplomacy fails and when war isn't an option. How do you slither in there? And it's the most to me. It's just like the most. It's the sexiest one because it's the most shadowy one. How does it? How does it not to derail from the book, but
Mm.
how does it make you look at world affairs now? How does it make you look at, because things are always declassified decades later, right? And you find out about, we were there or we were that or whatever. How does it make you look at things like on paper, officially, it's like there are no U.S. forces in, Ukraine. On paper, I'm sure there's like advisors in Taiwan or something. But then like you read these books and you're like, yeah, that's bullshit. There's no way we're not there.
Well, yeah. So I'm very, very glad not to be covering the day to day of stuff.
Yeah.
And and so I mean, I finished at the Sunday Times London in 2018. And all the time I would get calls like if I was working with them now, I would get a call like, okay, so you know, editor was having lunch with British Army general, and he said there's definitely CIA in Ukraine. Like we want a piece about that, like 1,500 words on Friday, and you have to sort of like creep around and speak to former CIA officers, speak to officials, and kind of just sort of work out what people are saying and really what's your best sort of guess. And then you have to write an article about what's going on. All the time, I would know, but that's not. I shouldn't know what's going on. I mean, and a lot of the time it's this old thing of the people who the people who know don't talk,
Hmm.
and the people who talk don't know with current operations. And so that's why I really love doing um, stuff like First Casualty, because it was 20 years on. So everybody's retired. I mean, as I was writing it, we were still in Afghanistan. I mean, just before publication, there was the August 2021 withdrawal. But basically, it's not really classified anymore. Nearly everybody's retired. You can kind of go to the actual people who wouldn't have spoken at the time. Most of them wouldn't have spoken um, in the meantime either because they've got serious jobs. I mean, Scott Spellmeyer's not going to speak to me when he's CIA representative on the National Security Council.
Yeah.
So you can actually go to them and find out what's going on. And so I'm not really super interested in reading articles about what supposedly the CIA is doing in Ukraine, because I just think they're not true. They're people who are sort of probably bullshitting. They're picking up scraps here and there. And if they really did know, they shouldn't be publishing it. So I'm kind of cynical about certainly current coverage of intelligence and a lot of stuff. I just think it's just people, journalists who are on the outside, who are picking up scraps um, and pretending they know but don't really know. I mean, I understand the reason for it, and certainly with politics, might be different covering the White House. But journalism, people sometimes say it's the first draft of history, but it's certainly not history, and it's certainly not truth. It's just kind of what's happening, what people are thinking in the moment, and it's uh, very much kind of captured by um, agendas, what excites editors, what's the flavor of the month, what's the vibe, all that kind of stuff. So I really enjoy not being part of all that and being able to sort of take a step back and find people, find the people who are actually involved and work out as close as I can what actually happened. And with First Casualty, there was some great journalism at the time at Calajangi, but nobody knew the full story, and there were an incredible number of errors, you know, egregious errors about Mike Spann, for instance, what happened, how he died, and stuff that still gets repeated to this day. But it was just people, doing the best they could on the day. Um, but it's Afghans who are being paid to be translators who are just serving up what's expected. It's editors in New York or Washington or London clamoring for details. Um, and so I'm really pleased to be sort of out of that sort of pressure to come up with something. What do you got? That day or the next day.
I should have prefaced that question with a big asterisk, like for the sake and fun of speculation, because I identify with that a zillion percent about kind of like how you're like, hey, that's the same logic that, special activities division. It's why, I mean, as somebody that does a podcast and this is my business and pays for my rent, when there are big news stories, I'll have people on to talk about them because those get views. But I've
Yeah,
always had less of a magnetic attraction to say, and it's not downplaying the importance of, but journalists on whatever, Twitter, Rumble, YouTube, pick your poison, because of exactly what you're talking about, is so much of it is speculation. And I definitely see where that's also maybe the fun. That's where the draw, the chasing that high, are you in a hall of mirrors? Which one's true? I get that. For me personally, I like things that are fleshed out and are there'll always be classified mysteries, but
yeah,
I guess I look at it as like if I'm going to invest my time and I have a limited amount of time in the day, I like to read about World War One, World War Two, Cold War documents because it's done. It's not only is it, over, but the people involved are mostly dead. And it's like the only people left are, in their 90s. And to me, it's more of that it's about as clear as the picture's gonna get, right? And that's why I like, because to me, I'm like, that's worth it. I'm reading this thing and it's real. I get the draw and the importance of journalism because people want to know what's happening now.
yeah,
But I think I look at it more of like I only have so much time in the day,
yeah,
and then not only that, it's like you said, if it's the people who are talking don't know, the people who are involved, you can read the classified stuff about how they shut their mouth, they don't talk
yeah,
to anyone, and you're probably not getting to the truth. And not only that, furthermore, when you look at the capabilities of the Special Activities Division and the Special Operations Groups, a lot of that is also misdirection in the media. So it's like,
yeah,
if you know anything about this, you know that not only are you going up against incompetent journalists, you're also going up against the premier intelligence services that are intentionally misleading you. So it doesn't really. I like the speculation because sure, you can look at something in the past and you can say, whatever. The SR-71 Blackbird flew on this date and wasn't declassified till this date. Okay, so we know this fact that something advanced was flying around. It was denied, and then eventually it was made, it was revealed, and you went, wow, that's insanely advanced. You can extrapolate and go, well, I imagine there's probably some sort of reconnaissance plane now that is equally crazy. It goes Mach 10, whatever. But there's not too much more to pursue on that because you're not going to find out. And again, I get where people might want to do that. It's a high, but I'm with you in that I would much rather know more than anything. It's just because it's like there's so much time in the day, and I can't read 100 theories and hope one of them's correct. I would just rather read a bit. And then not only that, the kicker is the real stuff that is declassified. It's so much sexier and cooler when you find out what really
Oh
happened.
yeah.
You're like,
Oh
this is
yeah. The best stories are true. There's no doubt about that. And I mean, the space I like and I kind of occupy in a way is where it's um, quite a while ago, like 20 or 30 years ago, but people are still alive. And so then you can do a mixture. There's kind of a sweet spot. You can speak to people um, who can. Most of the people are still alive. You can speak to them. Their memory is not what it was, and memories get distorted over time. But you also have the documentary stuff and the all the kind of uh, declassified documents or even documents that aren't declassified but you can kind of get hold of. And then you can piece when you can piece together the documents and the people, that's incredible. Now it's a lot more difficult because this current book I'm working on, um, a lot of the people I'm writing about are dead. And some of them were, what I think about two of them were in the OSS, and they were born in the 1920s, so they're dead, and they'd be over 100 if they were alive now. And that's harder because you're really excavating because I can't go and speak to them, and so that's the challenge. This book actually goes from essentially 1944 to 2016, and then at the more recent end, you have the opposite problem, which is it's harder to get people to talk because they're still working because it's very recent. Documents haven't been released, and so I guess the sweet spot is 20, 30 years ago when you have the people and you also have the documents.
because if you go too far back, the upside of going really far back is it's like not only are they all dead, but their grandkids are dead, and the country might not even exist. So it's really,
Right.
there's no vested interest in skewing it. Like, nobody's running cover for the Assyrian Empire. It's like it's over.
Right.
Yeah. But the other side is it's what you're saying. It's also cemented, and unless you find a document it's pretty much the story's written. I think that's why when I say, I always love Cold War. Well, I first started reading a lot about it in like 2005, and I kind of forget it's been 20 years now. But I like that because, like, I've gotten in touch with, I had a guy on in his late 80s who was actually out at the Castle Bravo hydrogen bomb test in 1954. And it's the one that
Yeah.
run amok. It was supposed to be 5 megatons and it ended up being 15. And to me, I'm like, but that's like the bleed. That's about as far back as I can
Yeah.
go. And then I've had people, 60s, 70s, 80s, and all that. And there is a sweet spot of documentation, and then you actually find the guy that was. I've had on Charlie Duke. He's one of three of the Apollo astronauts still alive who walked on the moon.
Yeah.
But he's, I think, almost 90 now. So that's kind of like you're about you're about there, and that is the sweet spot because you can still maybe I don't know read between the lines or they're saying something and
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
get in there and also you might talk to someone and it just gives you a completely different view of it versus again now it's very fun to speculate. Do we have a military base on the moon? And it's fun, it's sexy, I get it, but it's a lot of it's just kind of bullshit and kind of seems like a waste of time.
Yeah. And the trouble is also if you're, one of the things about journalism that would keep me honest and would keeps people honest or journalists honest is that you're writing about people you've spoken to who are alive, who are going to read it the next day, right?
Yeah,
But if you're But if you're an author and you're now writing about World War II, they're pretty much all dead. And so you have more license. And you, now, depending on what it is, there may be lots of great documents, there may be oral histories, there may be, recorded interviews from way back when. But a lot of the time I fear that people who are doing those books, they'll edge into historical fiction because they'll just make up they'll
Hmm.
because there are these massive gaps, um, and they'll fill them in with speculation which they'll
This is
present.
what Eisenhower was thinking. You don't know
Right,
that.
exactly.
You
This
don't know
they'll
that.
present that as the truth, right? Which is why, actually, in a way, I get kind of wonkier and wonkier as I get older. In that, I always want to look at the end note. Where did that come from? And yes, if somebody says what somebody thought, then I'm immediately, there's an alarm bell going off. But it may be that he thought that's because that was from Eisenhower's memoir, or that's because from Eisenhower telling somebody what he thought. So that's why I think the sourcing things are really important for sort of credibility and to sort of reassure uh, the reader. But the other thing is, and certainly from First Casualty, I found this: the really good stuff is what people will tell you, and you can ask them and in multiple different ways and multiple people about something, and then you'll get the sort of picture. But if you're just dealing from documents, particularly official documents, I mean, what official documents, would um, cover my life, in the last 10 years? What, a bunch of emails, some texts, stuff I said to my kids or whatever. That's not, you're not going to get a picture of the last 10 years of what I've been up to um, that way. You get it by talking to me. So I find if you're just dealing from documents, it's really, really, really hard. And as you say, stuff becomes cemented, so you just repeat things that other secondary, you you repeat things from secondary sources. But I really like the experience of getting to know people, um, sort of hanging out with them, really, um, and just and having these sort of like conversations. Sometimes it can be you might be going for a walk, you might be sitting on somebody's porch late at night, you might be having a drink or a meal, or they might be with their kids or their wife or whatever, and then you just it starts come tumbling out, and then you can put all that together. And I just sort of love that process. And although I studied history at university, and I get extremely excited about going into the National Archives and reading OSS documents and stuff. I really do. But it's not alive, it's dead. It's what people decided to put down on paper at the time. And that's
That last sentence is what I was actually you read my mind. Is I was gonna say, yeah, like in general, I don't know, the best way to describe it, in almost like a meme, is like, you look back at old pictures of our, our grandparents, and you're like, they were so regal back then. They're all in suits and ties, and it's like, well, there's also we all have cameras in our pockets, so you catch a zillion pictures of me a day, and sure, you could say on some objective level, we maybe don't dress as well as we used to, but it's also like photos were a rare occurrence back then. So you put on your best. It's
oh
like
yeah,
if you had an iPhone back then, you'd probably catch your grandma talking shit, saying
oh
gross,
yeah,
farting at dinner, and like
oh
you'd
yeah,
be like, oh wait, but because it's black and white and it's in a vignette, you kind of go, oh, they
oh yeah,
were. And it's also you have to go to that way with like podcast, like right what we're doing right now, that wasn't available. It was, man, if there was a video of you talking in the 30s, you have to be the president or I mean, I don't on the Yankees, So,
yeah.
and then when you look at that, you go, okay, it is video. But again, that's a rare thing. And in much of the same way, if I were to go and I don't know, give a best man speech at a wedding, I wouldn't approach it the way I approach the podcast, where I show up at the podcast and, like I read the book, make sure but I'm also, yeah, let's just let it rip. Versus something like that, I'm going to write it down, I'm going to review it, I'm going to practice it and it's not really me. So if you look back at, these aren't text messages. When you look at like cables from the 40s, this was decided to be put to paper. And you're never quite going to get the real person. If you look at an email I write to someone, let's say all somebody had evidence of our interaction was our emails. right? It's me.
Right.
You're going, oh, I've seen that guy. I'm like, I love the book, and you go back and forth, and that's it. Versus this. Let's say they didn't have access to this. This is
Yeah.
so much richer in the 20 minutes we've been talking. It's already a zillion times richer than the email. Now, this is just human interaction. Now, imagine if it wasn't recorded. Yeah, well, that's what you're looking at. So you're trying to piece together history by all these little nodes that are just the tips of icebergs, and the whole thing's
Right.
like,
Right. And so yeah, if we didn't have the recording, this would just have a conversation. And then in future years, somebody's like, so Toby, what do you remember from that conversation? Tommy, what do you remember from that? We would have completely
well,
different
your
views.
memories are all screwed too.
We'd have completely different views this afternoon, never mind 20 years later. And so that's where the sort of judgment comes in, where you piece it all together and it's not, you don't take everything literally and you kind of judge, what the deal was. And that's really interesting because you can't, if you're putting together, First Casualty, it sort of ran basically from, the team getting into, well, it ran from 9/11, team getting in the middle of October, the Battle of Kalajangi, November 25th, Mike Spann being killed, the battle going on, recovering his body. It's, that's the kind of timeline. That's all. I mean, even in 3 months, and I'm currently writing a book which covers like 77 years, but even 3 months, it's a lot of stuff. And so you have to distill it down. Um, and sometimes there's some video footage of stuff that happened. And it's really, really hard to make sense of because people don't speak in coherent sentences. The kind of the chaos of battle. If you wrote it literally from a video of what happened, it wouldn't make any sense at all. So you have to decide what to leave out. You have to decide how to make sense of things. Um, so yeah, I mean, all this stuff is very sort of hard to do, and you just have to be aware of how imperfect things are and how the judgment of the person putting the story together is absolutely crucial. And you can't just you know and there's a lot of things you just can't take on trust just because somebody said something. I mean, I have people I had some argument on Reddit the other day when people are trying to tell me what happened with Mike Spann being killed. And I mean, it's just somebody just shooting their mouth off because they sort of read something 10 years ago and they're trying. And I'm like, listen, I've spoken to David Tyson for dozens and dozens of hours. I've spoken to Afghans who were there. I've watched videos. I know. I've read the autopsy report. I know as much as anybody can know what happened. I know what happened. But there's some people that don't care because it's like, oh well, my opinion is, um, he was tortured and executed in the basement. So what can you what can you do?
Yeah, one thing that's kind of definitely made me re-examine. Well, one, I mean, just looking back because the podcast is obviously audio video. Just looking back a couple of years ago, I'll see videos of me and I'll be like, I remember that conversation different, but like there's the evidence that I'm like,
Yeah,
wow, that's not even something I have like a vested interest in lying about. Like I'm a kid and I'm trying to get away with something. I'm just like, I actually remember that differently. Another thing that's gotten me is so like I do this, it's just me. There's no employees, it's just me. It's coming up
yeah,
on
I'm
six
saying,
years, and yeah, and it's 1,800 something episodes, and I do it all, from emails to whatever. And I look at the amount of hard work it's and blah blah blah. And then sometimes I'll see comment, and that's just don't read comments; they're all poison. But that being said, some of the guests I get on, they go, "This doesn't make sense. How does this guy get these guests?" And I always tell, "Well, what did I do to you?" I find an email and then I ask them. But when I see like a conspiracy about me,
yeah,
right? So like I've had on like Dr. Malone, Dr. McCall, all during COVID, and or like some of the Black Ops guys I've had on. And the most recent one is just like a dude I befriended through Twitter, which is where again I get a ton of guests. Just special forces guy. We had a mutual, and I found out and he and I were just buddies, and we've just been doing shows together. Interesting guy. And I've seen comments about like I've never seen this guy on any podcast before, like January of this year. He shows up on Tommy's show, and then he starts showing up on other shows. Like this seems like a fed, and people are like, I agree, he's planted. And
No,
then
that's because Tommy called him and asked him
well,
if he wanted to go on.
so,
And
so
then other people saw the episode and thought, oh, that was interesting. I'll have him on.
no,
And
no,
that's
and not
how the
only
real
that,
world
the
works.
people that
Yeah,
saw him are like, he's interesting. They saw my
yeah,
show, and I go, do you want me to give you
yeah,
his number? They go, I'd love to have his number. And I look
yeah.
at that, and I look at like how innocent that is. And even if I showed people that, they'd be like, yeah, nice documentation. I'm sure you had that ready. And I go, oh, and that's my podcast, which I'm very proud of, but it's a very small show and it's 50,000 subscribers. Very proud of that. It is tiny in the podcast world. What happens when you start looking at geopolitical influence between the intelligence agencies in countries that have tens of trillions of dollars in their GDP and the stakes are global hegemony and resource extraction? It doesn't mean conspiracies aren't true. A lot of them are, but it makes me have a little more humility and go,
Totally.
how many
I
people in
mean,
like the White House are going? And no, no, sorry. And then the last point, imagine if my emails with like you or someone, imagine if that was classified and I couldn't even tell people. I go, I just met him on. Imagine if I couldn't even tell you that. I have to go, well, it's classified. They go, yeah, it's a conspiracy. I go, motherfucker. Like,
well, that's one of the problems that intelligence agencies have. You know, obviously they overclassify things
sure.
and they classify things that are embarrassing. And I mean, listen, welcome to my world. I mean, I have to do interviews sometimes in CIA headquarters for people who are still serving this current project. They can't mention the country they're talking about. They can't mention when it was. They can't mention any names. They can't mention any numbers of bullets, distances, um, number of people. And so it's like it's incredibly difficult I mean, it makes for some interesting conversations. Often I know a lot of those things, like where it was and when it was, and so I could, but it's like speaking this weird different language. But those are the rules in there, and so that means they're redacting all those things from all their documents, and we're all humans. When we see that blank redaction, we think, aha, what's under that sort of black strip, and often uh it's pretty mundane. And so I've had the experience recently of of um looking at redacted documents, and then some sort of family member or relative or somebody else give me the actual document, and so I can look at the doc, and so I highlight the text I have that's redacted, and it's interesting to see what's what's redacted, and it's often not as exciting, as exciting as what you think. But I mean, yeah, I think the idea that there's some sort of master puppeteer, pulling all the strings. I mean, the world is just much more chaotic
I
and
think,
random than that. I mean, it's usually, we I don't know whether this is a British phrase, but cock up versus conspiracy. Conspiracy is all arranged, it's all a fix. Strings are all being pulled, and the cock up is, stupid things happen. People make mistakes, random stuff happens. I don't know, Lee Harvey Oswald decides to shoot, Kennedy because his wife wouldn't have sex with him that morning. I mean, this real life, it intervenes or plays a big part in a lot of this stuff. And yeah, I find it, I mean, with First Casualty, I had some people being like, oh, the CIA contacted, you know, Toby Harnden and used him as a stooge to, put out their misinformation, and like nobody called me and said, "Hey, write this story." No, nobody. I went out. I came up with the idea. I was interested in these people. I hunted them down. The CIA didn't help me find them. I mean, they kind of helped a little bit towards the end. They didn't oppose it, and they facilitated a few interviews, but they didn't see the manuscript. They didn't tell me. They were mostly an impediment that I had to get around, and so it's. I'm sure you feel this way with podcasts. You're proud of getting tracking down a guest, persuading them to appear, and then somebody says it's all a fix. You're like, hey, no, it wasn't. I
I
did that.
worked
That was
hard.
that was my hard work.
I worked really hard to
Um,
get that guest.
right. So I guess it's funny. It's interesting. So because I got that from a few people with First Casualty, particularly in the UK, actually. And so I thought, okay, well, I talk on podcasts about how I found people, how I persuaded them to talk, how I pieced it all together. But for this next book, I'm actually planning to kind of incorporate the methodology a little bit in the book. Partly because I think the sort of the voyage of discovery, if you like, as you're the person representing the reader who's going into this world and working it out and working out who people are, what they did, what their stories are, and talking to them. I think that's sort of kind of interesting for the reader. Um, but it's also kind of protection for me to just sort of say, you know, I mean, I'm writing about a particular CIA gallantry award and the recipients of it, 39 recipients, 30, so 39 people. And what I don't want is for reviewers or you know readers or whoever to just say, oh, well, Toby Harnden was just sitting at home having a beer when the CIA phoned up and said, hey, we've got these 39 people we'd like you to write about. We'll just email you the names. I mean, it's so the reality is so different from that. Um, and I think it's sort of important for people to know that because otherwise, your work gets diminished. That this stuff does not happen because someone, I mean, the number of times people have contacted me to say, "Hey, I've got a story to tell," probably on one hand. It's me going out, building contacts, building a rapport with people, finding out who was involved, asking people to contact me, contact other people for me to put in a good word, going to events and kind of, introducing myself to people. That's how all this stuff happens.
Yeah, the number of people who've contacted me that have led to a show. I mean, no, even that though, it would be like if you gave someone my email and they were your buddy. And they're like, "Hey, I'm Toby's friend and I also write books." And I'd be like, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll check it out." But in terms of like people and that short, hey, you know what? If somebody did contact you and they're like, "We have this story," and it was about like a highly controversial historical, yeah, sure, maybe. I mean, hey, you know, pay attention. You pay attention to your gut. But every guest I've ever had on is not it's the idea wasn't even whispered in my ear like maybe you should have this guy on. It's me go like I had on a guy that owned the company that uses lasers to clean rust off like pipes. It just looked cool. Like that's how I go about this shit. Is like, oh, man, that looks awesome. And contact, and then not only that, what the people don't see is the 99 out of every 100 attempts you make. Not only do they don't say no, they just don't respond. So
Right.
it's this tiny little percentage. And again, what you said about like hard work. So like one guy like Dr. Robert Malone, he holds the patent for the mRNA vaccine. And I had him on like 6 months before he went on Joe Rogan. And I had him on because I've been trying for like a year to get him on using all these different emails and numbers that didn't work. And I finally found that when I lived in Maryland, his farm was not that far away. And I found the number of the farm, called, got his wife, and like that's how he and I became friends. And then another guy I had on was Dr. Stephen Hatfill, who's wrongfully accused of the whole anthrax scare post
Oh
9/11.
yeah, yeah,
He
yeah. I
ended up
remember him.
he
Yeah.
ended up suing the shit out of the government, and good for him. And I've had him on, and talked about his books, and like we've talked off camera for hours. He's just like a funny dude, and he and Dr. Malone know each other, and so like one time, and I've had them both on separately. And one time I had on Dr. Malone, and it was like a great episode. And I sent it, and no, sorry, I had on Dr. Malone, and I sent it to Steve Hatfill, texted him, and I was like, "You remember?" And he's like, "Oh my God, I haven't talked to Bob in years." And so I just made like a text group, and I was like, "Hey, you guys remember each other?" And they're like, "Oh my God, like I'd love to talk. Like, can we talk?" And me, being somebody who makes money off my podcast, when you guys just want to do a show together, and they're like, "Yeah," and because they're both always traveling, I was like, "Well, I know because I just had one of you on. I know you're like somewhat available. You want to do tomorrow?" They went, "Yeah." Got together, did the introduction, and then it's just two old friends catching up for an hour, and then I wrap it up and whatever. The clipped
Yeah,
videos I saw on Twitter of people going, "You're really telling me that this kid, this I'm 35 now, but this 32-year-old kid who he's just doing a podcast out of his bedroom, he's just a, down to earth buddy, and he gets on two CIA bioweapons experts, and they just one comes on, and then the next day they both come on. They're clearly pushing a narrative." And in my mind, I'm like, it was so comically innocent and entirely orchestrated by me.
yeah,
And I went, and if you don't know me and you looked at it, you'd be like, who is this kid? How did he, hey, who's this kid? How about maybe I work really hard and that's how I got the guess? Like, you
yeah,
ever think
yeah,
about
yeah.
that? And it's just,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, yeah.
Well, it's sort of interesting now because so much so I'm 59 years old. So I'm of that generation who works sort of pre-internet, and so I feel actually in a good place because I grew up and even started as a journalist. I guess I had a mobile, so I started in journalism in '94. I had yeah, I did have a mobile phone, but it was like a brick, but there was no internet, and so we'd find things out by going up to the newspaper library, cutting out clippings from newspapers all the time. I remember in Northern Ireland, I'd have, a pile for the Belfast Telegraph, pile for the Irish News, pile for the Irish Times, pile for the newsletter, and have the newspapers piling up over the course of like 2, 3 years. So much so that I'd have to go into that room and I was afraid the floor was going to collapse in, because of the weight of the newspapers. But that was my kind of reference library, and I needed to refer back to something happened on such and such a date, so I needed to go back to the newspaper. Um, but that was the time when you often would find people by knocking on their doors, you know, phoning them up. I couldn't just send them a text message. But nowadays, you have a whole generation of people who are just not used to cold calling people and saying, "Hey, this is who I am." They want to text, and they actually don't really want. Often they don't want to talk to people. They just want to look at what people have posted online, or the most they can do is like have a sort of a text conversation, which is not a real conversation. And so these types of people are the people who are commenting online, and people who comment online, they're not representative. I mean, I go down the rabbit holes with them as well. Um, they're often people with way too much time on their hands, and we should just sort of ignore them, because there's always going to be somebody who will say something. Um, and you see it on any Instagram video about some kid tripping over a curbstone and like covering his face. All these people blaming the mom, all these people blaming the dad, or somebody's blaming the road works people who didn't fix the curbstone. Somebody's going to be saying it's fake. I mean, it's just crazy. All the sort of the commentary, and you just have to sort of ignore it, really.
Yeah, and it's again, it's kind of like an eye rolling. Like I've been lifting weights for 25 years, and it's slow and steady. And anybody ever asks me how I do it, I'm like, well, it's 20 minutes a day, and you got to eat a lot of protein, and so you kind of fart a lot. And like that's not a fun answer. No one wants to believe it, but it's just what it is. And not only that, it's reproducible. You can find out for yourself. Same thing with the pod. I mean, it sounds like an eye rolling like okay, boomer, but it's like, how do you get guests? I'm like, you call them or you email them. You say, hi, my name's Tommy Carrigan. I'm just years old and I do this podcast. I'd love to have you on. Some of the shows are more informal and, vulgar. Other ones are very professional. And we can do this and I like to talk about your book. And here's some guys I've had on before and they come back and this is what I do. And some of them go, no. And some of them go, yeah, ping me again in 6 months. And I go, okay, we'll follow up in 6 months. And hey, how you doing, sir? I'd love to have you. And like, I'll show respect and all that. And like you said about, if you interview people and you're a journalist, you do have a little bit of a vested interest in not doing them dirty because they're going to read it. And for that same
Yeah,
reason, I never talk behind guests' back like on the show. I never ambush them on anything because And it's again, it's like, well, why do you do that? Well, because I don't know, I wouldn't want that done to me, or the golden rule. And a lot of it sounds so elementary. It's like, oh, you roll up your sleeves and work hard. And it's like, no, but that's what it is, man. Like it is what it is. And like you don't want to hear that because that's not a shortcut. That's not sexy. Like I got into medical school out of college. I decided not to go. How did I do it? I stopped drinking alcohol at the frat house and just studied around the clock. And it took years and it wasn't fun. It's
Yeah.
just what it is. And so in the same way, when I talk to some of these dudes who are in these high speed like black ops units and you get to know them, you go, oh, this is just a, hey, this is a dude that when you call them, they pick up. This is a dude that if you ask for something, they get back to you. They're very punctual. They remember your name. You go, oh, that probably bleeds into other aspects of it. It's not a surprise when you find out they also have a successful side business. You go, yeah, that makes sense that the guy who's a Navy SEAL is, disciplined. And there's kind of no sexy answer to it, and I think that's what riles people up. And but I guess to me, it's also what makes the real story that much more special when you do find out about these guys that are in these units,
Oh yeah.
and you
Oh
go,
yeah.
it's almost kind of in a weird way, it's almost kind of cooler that it's not orchestrated by some
Oh,
shadowy
totally.
group. You go, it's a bunch of dudes who are tasked with this crazy thing. All right, 9/11 just happened. President wants us over there. All right, let's try to. We'll try to figure this out. Bring some cash. We'll bribe the locals. Let's go. Like to me, that's
Totally. And
so
so
much
and so the
cooler.
other thing is so yeah, to take well, so there are a couple of things. First thing is people are people. People are human beings.
Yeah.
So yes, there are these people, these mysterious figures, these people on pedestal. Um, but ultimately, I feel everybody is human, and everybody really wants to tell their story in some way. They want to get their due. They want the truth. They want the truth to come out. Now, the circumstances have to be right. The timing has to be right. But they also have to have somebody who's going to ask them. I mean,
Hmm.
there are some people who will just off their own bat write a book or, you know, um, put something down on paper and give it to their grandchildren. But often they think they will, but they don't, and so they need somebody to come along. And often, if people, I mean, this is something I still struggle with a little bit. If somebody won't talk to me, somebody says no, I start to think, oh, why? What have I done wrong? Is it because I wrote this thing and they didn't like that? Is it because I made, a small, factual error in a previous book, in good faith? Is it because so and so, you know, is friendly with this person who's kind of a rival? Usually it's not. It's something that's happening in their lives. Like
They just
there's
don't want to
somebody I was
talk.
trying to, yeah, there was somebody I was trying to contact, um, who I did contact and said no, and then I was like, oh, that's weird. I wonder why. And then somebody said, oh, well, she was about to go on a Mormon mission to Scotland,
Oh,
you know, for a year. So she probably just had to pack, and she had a lot of stuff going on. Sometimes people are sad still, even years later, about a relative, and they're just not ready. And so, but I mean, sometimes I'll talk to people starting out in journalism or whatever, and I just say, the main advice is go to places, like show up. That sets you apart because so many people are just doing it on their phones and stuff. So go to an event. Don't just watch it on your phone. Go to an event, and then you can talk to people afterwards, and you can actually kind of see what's going on. If there's a as a news reporter, if there's in Northern Ireland, if something went bang, or there was a bomb, or there was a shooting, I was going, and it was amazing how many journalists would not go and would just listen to the radio and write it up from the radio reports. But every single time I went, I would meet somebody or I would learn something that would make it worth it. And then the other thing is just if you want to talk to somebody, ask them, call them, email them, knock on the door. If they don't respond to the email, I mean, do you respond to every email? I don't respond to every email. Usually it's because they forgot. And so just be polite. And if they say no, okay,
yeah.
back off. But maybe that no might be a yes in a couple of years' time. And then the other thing is like say with First Casualty, um, is yes, all those events happened. I ended up speaking to the six surviving members of Team Alpha. Mike Spann was killed there, and Mark Rausenberger died in 2016 in the Philippines. So I spoke to the six living people. I spoke to a bunch of the Green Berets who were with them. I spoke to George Tenet, who was the CIA director,
Mhm.
Topher Black, who was the head of the Counterterrorism Center, Hank Crumpton, who was the head of the Counterterrorism Center Special Operations, who was running the war. I spoke to General Mulholland, who was the task force down command. So I sort of I spoke to everybody, and everything in that book is true. Um, I spoke to all the Afghans. I traveled to Afghanistan in 2020. I interviewed General Dostum. But that story, that book, is still a sort of a work of creativity, of excavation, of synthesis, and putting it all together. And I know that if I hadn't put it together, that doesn't exist any. There'll be an after action report in the CIA, which I haven't seen, but that won't contain the full story. That won't contain what's in that book. So it's I don't know. I find it very exhilarating to be able to do that and sort of create something that's true, um, but sort of rescue it for history, if you like, because that's there and that's history in 50 years' time, 100 years' time. I'll be long dead, and people will be able to read that. And that's a pretty damn close approximation to what happened. And that was not just sitting there on somebody's desk for me to reproduce. That was something that I kind of created.
Something you put out into the world, and it's like
Yeah.
if you love history, to realize that you got something out there is kind of like the greatest honor. You go, oh, that's that's amazing, and like, I mean, like I was gonna say, yes, and sometimes people, yeah, you go, man, that guy's kind of an asshole, and they get back to you 2 weeks later, and they're like, ah, man, I just put my dog down. I've had him forever, and you're like, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'd love to do it sometime. You're like, oh, like, okay, and yeah, and then like I think one example, maybe the most shining example of everything. It's a conspiracy. It's not. It's the human factor. Is Dr. Ken Alibek, who is the head of the Soviet bioweapon program. He didn't want to be. He wanted to be a doctor, but in the Soviet Union, they tell you to do things at the point of a gun. And okay, so they were putting like Ebola in the nose cones of ICBMs, crazy shit. And I wanted to get him on here, and he defected or not defect he was defected with the help of the CIA and I think like 89 or 90 before the Soviet
Okay.
Union fell because he was it was like a modern day Operation Paperclip. Like they wanted him. They wanted to know what the Soviets were doing. 'Cause the Soviets are obviously lying about their bioweapon program because they thought we had one, whatever, all the Cold War stuff. Gets back here and he's just, VIP asset one and they, I would imagine, debrief him, squeeze all the juice out of him, witness protection. Think he testified before Congress in the early 90s when I was a toddler, and then that was it. And you really couldn't find anything on him. And I just been trying to get him. I just want to talk to him because it was like right during COVID. And I finally found an old article that said he worked at just some vanilla company out in Ohio, something that's like loosely related to I don't know, fertilizer. And I ended up getting a secretary and just kind of kept the ball in the air for months and months and months. And finally, she was like, I can get you, an email maybe or a phone call maybe. And I was like, okay. Got in touch with him. And I had read his book, Biohazard, all about his time. And I'm like, I finally got him. This is after like a year. I'm like, I'm so psyched. There are no interviews with him. I'm like, I got this. And he gets on his super thick accent and he's like, I would love to talk to you. He's like, but nothing about the bioweapons. And in my mind, I'm like, but that, like, shit. That'd be like if I got you and you're like, I'd love to. I just don't want to talk about anything to CIA. I'd be like, oh, damn it. Like, what am I going to do? I mean, but I was like, you know what? In my mind, I went, dude doesn't want to talk about it. And it was just like, treat him like you would like to be treated. And so I was like, you know what, Dr. Al, we talk about whatever you want, man. And I was let down and I was like, and he was like, let's do it. We start the thing. We're not 2 minutes in before he's like, let me tell you a story. And he just immediately goes into the bioweapons for like an hour and a half. And he's just smiling and laughing. And I'm like, I got it. And like I
Yeah.
wasn't like a bad person. I didn't do it behind his back. And it turned out great. And he and I like eventually we became friends and he's helping his daughter who has autism. He's like legitimately become like a friend of mine. And then when I look at that in the same comments, like, oh, this guy's a fed, I just go, not only was it a lot of hard work, but this guy's also a dude who more than he wanted to talk about bioweapons, he wanted to talk about the challenge of raising a daughter with autism and what you can do to. I've done more episodes with him about autism and things you can do
Mm,
to help kids with diet changes and medications. The bioweapons is just sort of like a, oh yeah, that's like an old thing. And I look at that and I go, how does that not apply to everyone in human history? Like I didn't know until last year. I read like Woodrow Wilson was super depressed during the Treaty of Versailles, the League of Nations, and they're kind of
yeah.
dividing up the
His
world.
wife had just died.
Yeah, and he like didn't eat. Everyone else is in there. It's the apex of world power, and he's just depressed because the love of his life just died. He's like crying and tired, and he's like, yeah, I don't, divide it up. And you go, and that's at the highest after the Great War. That has to bleed over into every aspect of life. And again, it kind of it doesn't make this stuff less exciting to me. It makes it so much more exciting when you talk to someone, you go, oh, this guy also, takes a morning shit. Even the president burps. It makes
Yeah,
it so much more valuable to me that there are not these untouchable gods that you can't relate to. And you go, well, why did Woodrow Wilson do this? Well, because he was really sad because his wife died. And you're like, oh, I get that. And so, yeah, no, I think we're both in agreement. It's like,
and the other thing is I'm a great believer. So if I mean if I have a sort of an interview technique, if you like now, it's different when you're working for newspapers because you're on a really tight um, time crunch. You know, you have to get the story written within hours sometimes, or the next day, or whatever, and so you can't do like 3 hour interviews. Um, but if I have an interview technique now, I find it's let it breathe, never have an end point,
mm-hmm,
and let it be a conversation and talk about what the other person wants to talk about as well as what I want to talk about, and let it kind of flow.
just,
And and if they want to go down a rabbit hole, go down the rabbit hole with them because
yeah.
sometimes there can be incredible things down that rabbit hole.
Oh,
But
yeah.
if you go in with this tunnel vision of I want to know this, 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 and this, you see it with, I mean, it's classically with TV interviews
Yeah, no, you're
where
preaching to the
they're
choir,
asking the
man. This is how I
questions.
go. Yeah, this is how I do it.
They're, they're so focused on the question, they're not even listening to the answer, and they're cutting people off, which makes them ill at ease. But just you know, also it's sort of respect and treating the person like a human being. Like you're not just trying to get something from them. You might tell them things like have a conversation like, "Oh, I remember this," and you talk about dogs or the weather or the snakes in the yard or whatever it is. And so it's kind of it's it's effective because people relax and they open up and they, and they don't think, well, this is just a guy who's trying to get something from me who doesn't care about me. Um, and I find I mean, we were talking about technology, AI transcription. I mean, I can do a 3 hour interview, plug it into Otter on my phone, and then within 5 minutes, there's a really, really good transcription of it. And I said, he talked about, covert action in Cairo. Okay, so I'm going to search for Cairo, and there it is, and I can sort of listen to it. So the technology is there to help you with these things, but yeah, it's very important, I think, to listen to people, um, to look at them in their totality, because yeah, what motivates them, you know, I mean, if they're really interested in cars or their wife died of cancer, 10 years ago, or they've got problems with one of their kids, or their mother was an immigrant from Germany who didn't speak the language when she arrived in World War. So all these things help you understand the person as well, and they're really, really interesting. I mean, I'm sure one of the reasons why you do this is because you're really interested in people.
Yeah,
And certainly for me as well, like everybody's interesting in
yeah.
some way. You'll always find something interesting.
And it's the the let it breathe thing, dude. That is exactly what I do. That is 100% what I do. I mean, this interview as an example. we kind of started with the book and the CIA, and we just went off in a right field because that's where it's naturally going, and just like let it go in that direction. And I always, I always tell people, I'm like, no, not only do I not have topics going in, I actually prefer, it's not like a passive thing. I don't have topics. I actually prefer to not have them because otherwise it just turns into this, I don't know, like report. And,
Right.
and especially it's like if I'm trying to make myself in a industry that is completely saturated, I can't do what everyone else is doing. And so if you
Yeah.
walk into it and be like, why did you write the book? What is it about writing books? And you're like, and I've gone on people's shows where they want that, and it's just I don't have the heart to tell them, I'm like, dude, this sucks. When they're like, Tommy, let me, and I'm just like, what are we doing? Like, just let it breathe in its most natural way. And those are just the most fun things. It's legitimate, it's genuine, and it's wild. And that's how people talk. I put it this way. It's like, like whenever back went to like a public or whatever, I'd always sit in this and I'd always just befriend like dudes in the sauna. We'd just be talking. I get along with like the old guys. And we'd always have a good time and just laugh and whatever. And that's just Irish gift of gab, whatever. And then I thought, that's how I like doing the podcast. And how eerie would it be if I came into a sauna and you're in there and I was like, hello, what do you do for a living? You'd be like, who is this creep? And I'd be like, do you like work? You'd get out of there. You'd think I'm up to something. Versus you just start shooting the shit next to somebody on a plane. That's real. And I'm like, well, then why would I make it any different on what, because there's a camera?
Yeah.
Now it has to be here we have Tobias Harnden here to talk. You'd be like, "F off, dude. Like f off." And it's just, I don't know. It's
Uh,
not real. It's not, and it's also just boring. It's legitimately boring. Above all else, man, I don't want to do it. I
mm,
don't want to do it. It
mm.
sucks. So I think we're in
Yeah, I mean,
agreement with that.
I've done a couple of podcasts where people have sent me all the questions beforehand.
Oh
I don't even read.
God.
I don't. I mean, that's fine,
I won't look
but
at them either.
but, yeah, I don't read. I don't read them. And listen, you can do. You know, you know. Obviously, often if I'm going to interview somebody, there's a particular thing I'm really, really fascinated about, and
Yeah.
I will make. I'll make sure I'm going to ask it, but at the right sort of moment.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are occasions, certainly in journalism, where um, you know you're going an interview, you really only do want to know one thing, um, and you'll talk about everything else, and but that kind of killer question or the thing you really want to know about will be sort of hidden in there, um, and it'll seem to the other person like it's just one of your 50 questions, but actually it's the only one that really matters. So you sort of you do you do that, and I do have usually like a kind of a mental checklist, sometimes even a physical checklist of these are kind of the things I want to cover. Um, but a couple of times as a journalist, I've been in group situations where I don't like doing it, where I've had to interview a person with somebody else. And I remember coming away thinking, like, holy shit, how does this person even operate as a journalist? You were so rude. You were cutting the guy off. You were disagreeing with him. You were arguing with him. You were you were just like openly looking bored when he was talking about what he wanted to talk about.
Oh
So
God.
it's kind of it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a little shocking sometimes. Things I take for granted as just what everyone does. And then you go on a podcast where they don't do that. Like for me, I'm like, it's a basic. It's back to like just how but as far back as I can remember, just being like a little kid, even just going to like grandparents for Christmas. I mean, it's like mom and dad, family friends are gonna be there. Your uncle's gonna be there. You know, you look them in the eye and you shake their hand. Like even at 5, it's just stuff like that. And I think now it's so. How does that bleed over? Like having gone to private Catholic school for 12 years, what's a big secret of the show? Is I put my phone on airplane mode and I make sure it's out of my reach so I don't even passively reach for it. Why? Because it's a shitty feeling to be on an interview and you just see yeah, you're like,
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just
Yeah.
like, and it's like I'm not the Queen of England. Like I'm not saying you gotta like kiss my feet, but it's like if you're doing that, then it's like you're not interested, and that's fine. Let's just kind of like wrap it up. But I know what you're doing, and it's a weird feeling, and it's just or yawning. You're kind of looking around. You're like, hey man, what do you like, do? You not have like the basic understanding of just showing attention and about the going in with the questions and the yeah, so it's like this like yeah, I'd say there was like a common thread in this that, when I first contacted you was I read your book. I'd love to talk about it. But that's about as much of a parameter as I'd put on things.
Mm.
And you could say, let's say, and it wasn't intentional, I just shooting the shit, but let's say it was intentional. Let's say I really wanted to get to the book, but I wanted to dress it up as something else. Even then, if you just take something down a path, like you said, let it breathe, walk down that road with them. I don't even have to at some point start asking you about the book. It will come out of you because it's yours, and we're going down this walk together into you. So, like, what are
Yeah.
we talking about? The hard work behind the scenes, what people don't see, the human factor. It can't be too old because everyone's dead, but it can't be too recent because it's all classified. What does that all naturally come into? Your book. Even if I had
Right.
never had brought it up, that leads to your book, and in turn, that also leads to my podcast. So it's, I don't know, maybe
Right. But sometimes the things on your checklist, you don't need to ask the question because it just comes out anyway
yeah.
through the natural sort of conversation. And also just by being, you know, just by being genuinely interested in everything this person did and who they are and where they came from, that will lead to all sorts of things, and that will lead to most of what you want. Um, anyway,
That's a let's hit on that is and I don't we're coming up on an hour, so we can
yeah,
wrap it up whenever, but um the genuinely interested. I remember before I ever started the podcast, like a year or two before, I remember hearing this like Stanley, I think Stanley made Marvel. He had a quote where it was, once I stopped writing and drawing what I thought people wanted, and instead created what I wanted, is when it all took off. Instead of trying to what do the people want, he's like, I want to write, I don't know what all Spider-Man, whatever, the Hulk, Captain
yes,
America. And why do I like have on these? Nobody said, Tommy, no publisher reached out and they're like, this is a great book. You should push it. And it's like, well, maybe I could make a couple bucks. And I'm like, how was First Casualty? No, I read it. Nobody told me to buy it. Maybe Audible recommended it to me. And I read it on my own because I wanted to. And so I have you on, and it is a natural thing. You and I aren't talking about something I don't care about. And that's
yeah,
so, and I always tell people that, like, if they ask how do I get along with guests well, it's because I always say this is you cannot fake the spark. You can read through questions. I could read through questions about something I don't care about. I'll be like, what did you think about the textile revolution in Maine in 1802? And I can do that, and anyone can. Versus when it's actually like, dude, your book is sick, and you go into it, you can't fake that. And to me,
yeah,
that alone is that everything else just happens. You don't have to plan the rest of it. Two sparks,
yeah,
give it an hour, make sure it's recording. It does itself. And
yeah.
yeah,
But
so
a traditional sort of Anchorman type TV, that's what it is. And I couldn't do it. I mean, I
oh
admire people who
God.
could do it in a way, but they have an army of producers who are doing all the booking, who are doing like a
Uh
pre-interview, and then the person, I mean, I've done it because I've been the guest sometimes. You arrive on set, you've never spoken to the host before. They don't know really anything about you other than what the the um the producer is feeding them. They certainly have not read your damn book. Um, and but then for 2 minutes they can kind of fake that you're the sort of you know their best friend, and
yeah,
it's very hard to do because it is totally fake,
it's a completely
and
fake.
I couldn't do it. And I mean the point you made about doing what you want to do Um, absolutely. I mean, I feel, you know, I mean, there's not much money in what I do. It's hard. If I wrote a book saying Grump is fascist, you know,
You'd be a
I would probably sell.
trillionaire tomorrow.
That would sell a lot more books. If I sold a book saying, Trump is the second coming of Jesus Christ, that would probably sell a
Same.
lot of books as well. I don't care about Trump. I don't care about politics. I cover politics for years. I
Yeah.
kind of hate all of them.
Yeah.
And but I could easily be persuaded. I guess, I could easily be persuaded in a way. Oh, you shouldn't write about the CIA. There's like 20,000 people in the CIA. People on the left have always hated it, since, the Church Commission in Church Committee in 1975. Oh, now all the people on the right are, suspicious of it because of the deep state, and people believe in conspiracy theories, and this doesn't there are no conspiracy theories in this. So it's not, it just shows that it's not the Jason Bourne type of stuff. So don't do that. Write a book about Trump. Write about a book about Trump. And then so so I would hate myself. It would be a terrible book, and it would probably fail anyway because my heart isn't in it. And so it's better, I think, to do what you're passionate about, what really want to do. Now you have to be sensible. I can't write a book that's 250,000 words. I have to
Sure.
grab the reader's attention. I have to sell the idea to a publisher who wants to make money out of it. So I don't want to write a book that no one is going to read, because that's pointless. But at the same time, I think if you do what you love and you do what you're good at, then at some time, hopefully, maybe it'll all fall into place, and you'll have just written this thing that hits the moment, um, and it just sort of explodes, and that's your success. But you never would have had that if you've gone off and written your book about Donald Trump being a fascist or whatever it is, because you're also just doing something that everyone else is doing,
Uh-huh.
and if your heart's not in it, I mean, if you're Maggie Haberman and you grew up in New York and you've covered Trump for years, and yeah, that's different.
Sure.
That's a different type of thing. But if you're just chasing what you think the market wants, then I think you'll probably fail, and you're better off, being aware of trends and what people are interested in, certainly, but doing what you want to do, and because so much is random, news events, stuff that happens that suddenly make a book relevant. I mean, if you're Peter Bergen, on 9/11, you're just completing a book about Osama bin Laden, which the publisher probably was going to print, I don't know, 8,000 copies or something, and didn't think it was much of a seller, and they were upset with you because you were taking too long to do it. And then all of a sudden 9/11 happens and you've got the most relevant
Yeah.
book. But I guess, I mean, I know Peter a little bit, but if he'd been like, oh, publisher had said, oh, you should write one about Carlos the Jackal instead, then he would never would have had that book at the right time. So he achieved that success in part by saying, no, I'm interested in this kind of slightly obscure thing, um, because I'm interested in it, and who knows, one day maybe, um, you know, particularly relevant. And then 9/11 happens, and it is.
Yeah. Yeah, like when I look at like the front page of like Rumble or something. Like I've been banned from YouTube for 5 years, but when I look at like the front page of Rumble or something, and it's like a big part of me understands it because they go, yeah, you're collecting a paycheck. But when every day it's you will not believe what Donald Trump just said to the stupid libs, or the flip side on Reddit, right? AOC crushes Trump. Just like I'm like
Yeah,
I'm like, do like do you really want to? If some people really do want to talk about it, and that's fascinating. I don't want to understand that, but I go, wow, it must be fun to be like that jacked up about it every day. But I go, I don't care, man. I don't care. I want to talk about this, and because what's the point of doing it other? Now the flip side would be like, could I be persuaded to do that? Yeah, or hey, I've gone on shows too where this is the producer, and here you're gonna talk to this person beforehand and this person after. And in my mind, I'm like, I do all of this. on my own and I read the book, I go, well, what in God's name could ever convince me to do that on the other side? To put on the fake. Yeah, it'd probably have to be like an eight-figure check. You look at like a
Right.
Colbert or like or someone I go,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
if you did that, you go, I could get in and out for 1 year and then go back to journalism. I go, yeah, okay, I get that. If for 1 year I had to do a podcast where I'd be like, Toby, the CIA was so much better back then, but it's clear that Donald Trump is a fascist, and you went along with it, and I gave you a kickback. I sent you like 100 grand of Bitcoin. Yeah, I could do that for a year. But around about a year is probably when I'd start getting suicidal. So like,
Right.
if you're getting
I,
enough money that you can then go do journalism for the rest of your life, okay, okay,
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
we're getting big
Yeah, I
scale.
think it's, I think if you're just chasing numbers or money, at a certain point, I'm certainly not at the point, but at a certain point, I guess a lot of money, what's a very lot of money versus a lot of money? I mean, we're all going to die. We can't
Yeah,
take it. We can't take it with us. I don't really care how much my kids get of it because I want them to earn their own
yeah,
good living anyway. So what? So what's the? We all need to pay the bills and go on vacation
yeah,
and all that kind of stuff. But really, you know, at the end of your life, you want to be able to think, you know, I help people, I contributed something that's going to last longer than me. I had a good time. I was kind to people. People trusted me. I kind of did things, like for instance, First Casualty, which has morphed into. We have a charity called Badger Six, which helps Afghan allies. I know that by putting the story together, I reconnected a lot of the people involved who had kind of lost touch. Um, Shannon Span, Mike Span's widow, is very much sort of part of the group, and I think um, people. I mean, some of the participants have told me that they learned a lot from the book, even though they were there because they were doing their own bit. They were focusing on what they had to do, and they didn't know what was happening to the left of them and to the right of them. And so to put that together, I think has really really helped them come to terms with what happened. And so that it's kind of enriched their lives. And so those are the things that I want to at the end of my life, it's hopefully it's a way still. I want to be able to think, yes, I did that story. I helped these people. I left something that was worthwhile. And if it was just like, oh, I got, X million dollars or, you know, X million viewers or these likes or I don't know, to me, that would just feel so incredibly empty
yeah.
because and and just sort of not meaningful.
Yeah, when I talk about like, what would make me do that, it'd be a huge paycheck. Even then, when I say that, I go, well, it's like, well, why do I want the paycheck? I would want the paycheck so that I could fund this podcast for the rest of my life. So even then, it's like it's not even money for like a car. Like, no, I would take that just so I could do things like this and not worry about if they, produce money. And then, lastly, what you said, like, is it meaningful? Was there something out of it? And I look at so in 2014, I lost my older brother to suicide. Completely fucked me up. And I look at like some of the dudes I've like talked to on this show, you know, veterans, PTSD, and they've created groups where they deal with veterans and suicide prevention, some like psychedelic therapy and stuff. And I look at some of even just the connections I've been able to make, or if no connections, just I can give them a platform. I'm like, hey, you can use the soapbox, 50,000 people, and they get whatever some donations. That means more than everything else on the show combined. Like right now, I'm
Mm.
35. I think I'm relatively young. I'm like, yeah, well, I also got to make money and pay the bills and all that. But yeah, no, I know when I'm at the end, I'm going to be like, what was the point of all of it? Even if I did enjoy it all and I didn't sell my soul and I made good money, like, what was really the point? And I'd like to think that I left the world slightly better than I found, even if just a little bit on the needle.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's worth that's that's the biggest thing. Interest, money, no, that's the biggest thing is like, did I meaningfully do something with my time? And I think that's what it is. And yeah, when I look at like nightly night show hosts, I'm like, dude, they must be just empty. There must be no soul behind those eyes. There's just nothing. Like it is cocaine and tranquilizers. Like what? Yeah, I don't know. Like there's no way they're happy. There's no way
Yeah.
they enjoy that. So I don't know. Um, but yeah, let's wrap this thing up. For everybody listening, please go into the description. You can go find the link to the book, and I'll put the links to the other books in there as well. I will email you this, and yeah, dude, I'd love to have you back on. I'd love to have you back on for the next book or the other books, and yeah, we'll shoot
Sure.
the shit sometime.
Okay.
All
All
right,
right.
man.
Thanks a lot, Tommy. Enjoyed it.
Yes, sir. That was so much fun, man. Thank you so much.
Hey there! Are you tired of skyrocketing subscription costs? With Q Broadcast, you get an entertainment package that is unmatched by other providers, with all your favorite content in one affordable bundle. Enjoy a 15-day trial for just $14.99. And if you refer 3 friends and they stick around, your subscription is free. Say goodbye to high-priced subscriptions, contracts, and hassles, and say hello to streaming simplicity with Q Broadcast. This changes everything.
Heaven's Harvest Prepper Food, 72 servings per pail, 25 years shelf life. I've had the owner Clayton on the show before. He's a God-fearing, America-loving patriot. Get one of these, get a couple of them, throw them in your basement. It's good to have it, not need it, than to need it and not have it. If you don't want to do that, you can get their seeds. You can plant your own garden, so you don't even have to keep buying them. You can just get the goods and start your own, or you can even get freeze-dried fruits and vegetables like bananas, apples, strawberries, and raspberries. They support the show. It's an honest product. It's a good safety measure to have, and they keep my show free for you. So I'd implore you guys to please go to heavensharvest.com, use the link in the description, promo code TPC. Axios Fitness Coaching is a premium resource for holistic strength and conditioning services. Axios is best known for the Training Club, capital T, capital C, an exclusive community that prioritizes accountability, technique, diet, and nutrition. Everything you need to do to take action against the decay of the modern world. Whether you're looking to improve your physique, build strength, or just take care of your health and fitness, Axios will provide you with a solution that is effective and simple to execute. All you need to do is complete the intake survey, and you can see if you're a good candidate for the training club or any other of the services. And it's going to sponsor the show. So, one company falls off, another one arises. So if you guys like the show, you want to work out, throw the show a couple shekels. Go take the survey. Thank you so much, guys.
Higher ultraviolet exposure is associated with lower mortality. The United Kingdom is a high latitude and low sunlight country. Researchers there collected data on over 360,000 participants in a study of UV exposure via solarium use. When compared with non-users, solarium users had 15% risk lowered of all-cause mortality, 23% lower risk of cardiovascular mortality, 14% lower risk of cancer mortality, and a 12% lower risk of non-cardiovascular, non-cancer mortality. In other words, all other causes. Quoting the researchers, our study adds to the growing evidence that the benefits of UV exposure outweigh the risks in low sunlight environments. A link to the original publication is available in the box below the video. Get some UV light this winter. Immerse yourself in the tranquility of the blue. Visit a Blue Room soon. www.blueroom.com